welcome to PFF at Night. I'm Doug Kyed, joined by Meirov and Brad Spielberger. Ari, how are you doing today?
Doing good, guys. And well, I don't know about you, but like scrolling through social media and just seeing a lot of football tweets going on, like it's pretty cool right now. Like it's like officially back. It's been a while.
Yep, today was the first day of training camp for a lot of teams around the league. Brad, how are you doing today?
Yeah, we make fun of the overhyping and the videos and how they're doing it, not even in pads. And then I fall for it every single time, pretty much immediately.
Absolutely. I was at a training camp today. I was at New England Patriots training camp because it's 20 minutes down the road from me. And because I like you guys so much, I headed home, even though I'm going back to Gillette Stadium for a concert tonight. But just want to give kind of an update on the state of the Patriots right now. We did see Patriots offensive line coach / senior coaching advisor Matt Patricia calling plays for the Patriots, not Joe Judge, not so much Bill Belichick, but still does seem like it's going to be kind of a three-headed monster there leading the Patriots offense. That was a good practice for quarterback Mac Jones and wide receiver Devontae Parker had two big catches in the red zone for the Patriots, had another nice reception. Good to see him and Mac Jones getting some chemistry early. A couple other notes. Trent Brown still at left tackle, Isaiah Wynn at right tackle. That's the same as it was in the spring, but different than it's been for the Patriots over the last few years. Not sure how happy Isaiah Wynn is about this move to right tackle. I personally wouldn't be that psyched if I were him, but Patriots trying something new there. And then one other thing was that Trent Brown talked after practice, said that it's a definitely simplified offense, but he thought that the receivers and offensive linemen would be able to play faster because it's a simplified offense. But we've heard for years how complicated the Patriots offense is. Probably not a bad thing to simplify things a little bit now with Mac Jones at quarterback and some new coaches leading the offensive staff. Ari, did you have any major takeaways today from training camp?
Yeah, I think we got some significant news out of New Orleans. Michael Thomas is officially off the PUP list. He's back practicing, running routes on the field, catching passes from Jameis Winston. And it's really just major news because he's been dealing with this severe ankle injury, which originally occurred in September of 2020, the first week of the COVID year, in garbage time in Tom Brady's first game as a Buc. It's been that long. I mean, he missed all of last season after undergoing off-season surgery. There was the miscommunication in the off-season last year with the team regarding the surgery, ended up missing the year. It was a very big mess. He's back on the field with Chris Olave, with Jarvis Landry. And of course, the last time we got to see him was in 2019. The last time we had a full year of him was in 2019 when he had a record-setting season, catching 149 passes, the most in NFL history, for over 1,700 yards and 9 touchdowns. He was the highest grade. He had the highest grade receiving grade on PFF that year. So significant news out of New Orleans with Michael Thomas being back on the field.
Definitely a short stay for Michael Thomas on the physically unable to perform list. So that's certainly good for the Saints. Brad, did you have any major notes training camp from following it along on Twitter today?
Yeah, another AFC East team, the New York Jets. And I mentioned him because I think he is an interesting name to keep an eye on and maybe a trade before the season. But there was a lot of talk about Denzel Mims, the New York Jets wide receiver today. He apparently wowed in practice, went up, made a couple touchdown grabs. He's always had that vertical ability, but really showed it off. And it sounds like he's in great physical condition. It's no longer a COVID season, missing time. And he was working out with Zach Wilson all offseason. So, hey, whether it was Joey Douglas slipping $10 to beat reporters to drive that trade value up or not, obviously kidding. I think it's a big development in New York. They now have 4 legitimate wide receivers, maybe get some trade return on a, recent second round pick in Denzel Mims.
Some other news out of Jets camp, just to go through real quick. George Fant playing left tackle for them. Mekhi Becton at right tackle. So, kind of similar to the Patriots, some moving along the lines for the offensive line for the Jets. Let's get into the biggest news out of yesterday. Still news today. That's Julio Jones signing a 1-year contract with the Tampa Bay Buccaneers, reportedly a $6 million base salary worth up to $8 million. I'm not sure what I would have predicted for a salary for Julio Jones, but I think this seems right. He's only played 902 snaps combined over the last 2 years, lots of hamstring injuries. So I think it's worth getting him in the building for a base salary of $6 million. Maybe I'm a little bit surprised that it's not worth more, up to more than $8 million. but seems like a good fit there in Tampa for Julio Jones. Aria, what do you make of Julio Jones being Tom Brady's latest weapon?
Yep, adding to a stacked wide receiver room, joining Mike Evans, Chris Godwin, his former teammate at Russell Gage, and now again teammates in Tampa Bay. I think obviously the Julio Jones that we once all knew, we haven't seen that in the last 2 years, has missed 7 games in each of the last 2 seasons of 14 games in total, has had a nagging hamstring injury. The one thing I took away from all of this was really Todd Bowles speaking to reporters today and just mentioning we're bringing him into this, but he's not really going to be the guy he always was. Like, he's just gonna be another guy as part of this team, someone who could potentially help out with the loss of receptions that we had with Rob Gronkowski leaving until Chris Godwin is fully healthy. But he's just another guy in the mix who will help out this team, especially after what we saw last year when they had a couple of wide receiver injuries late in the season and they had some unexperienced players playing during crucial parts of the year. Having another experienced guy in this lineup, in case that does happen this year, will definitely help them out. So obviously hoping for a healthy Julio Jones. He's clearly in the back end of his career, trying to get that first ring of his career. He had a chance once upon a time, lost to Tom Brady. Now he's Tom Brady's teammate, and we'll try to win one with him.
You would have surprised a lot of Falcons fans, 2-3 years ago, if you told someone that not only were Julio Jones and Russell Gage suddenly playing on the Buccaneers, but that Russell Gage is making more money than Julio Jones. Certainly a big surprise. But Brad, what was your biggest takeaway from that deal?
Yeah, like you said, we haven't seen the same Julio Jones, but I do think there's certainly a floor with a guy of his caliber. So $6 million up to $8 million. I'm guessing maybe the floor he was willing to accept and is willing to take a little bit less to go play with Tom Brady in Tampa. He hasn't been the same guy, but since 2014, when Mike Evans, his new teammate, was drafted, they're first and third in receiving yards in the NFL, with Julio in first and Mike Evans in third. So dynamic duo. Once Chris Godwin comes back, a dynamic trio. Even if he's not the same player, he's a good blocker, which will help in Tampa Bay. Has some ability on the inside if they want to kick him inside while Godwin is absent. I think it's why not take a flyer on Julio Jones?
I think a few years ago, you saw teams obviously going, 2 deep at wide receivers. Some teams would really go 3 deep and spend a lot of money. Teams really do seem to be going 4 deep at that position at this point. We saw it with, the Los Angeles Rams last season when they added Odell Beckham Jr. We see it now with the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. You even see it on kind of a lesser degree. I was at Patriots camp today, but the Patriots already had Kendrick Bourne, Jacoby Myers, and Nelson Aguilar at wide receiver, and then they trade for Devontae Parker. So I think that could almost become the norm where teams are looking for 4 starting caliber wide receivers rather than just 2 or 3. Brad, Chicago Bears, Riley Reiff signed to a 1-year deal worth up to $12.5 million, but counts just $3 million against the cap due to some easily attained but not likely to be earned incentives. Kind of some creative cap maneuvering done by Chicago. Brad, take us through that deal.
Yeah, it was a great way to avoid, getting a larger salary cap charge. So the first of it is he plays 10% of snaps, and this is for $4.5 million. But then also the team has to improve in one of 6 offensive categories. That can be passing yards, passing touchdowns, the points they score. Yes, their offense does not have a lot of believers this year, but it has some pretty easy benchmarks to clear from last year as well. So odds are he'll earn that $4.5 million, and there's an additional $2 million if he plays a certain snap threshold. My guess is 1% of snaps more than he played last year in Cincinnati. And on that note, he's played 700 snaps in 9 straight seasons. He played last year at right tackle where he hadn't played since 2016. Still earned a 67.3 overall grade from us. Played in a similar wide zone rushing scheme in Cincinnati that's figured to be a part of the Chicago Bears offense. So once again, adding their potential starting left tackle in the July-August range for the 2nd year in a row. But I think a needed move for an offensive line that was probably going to get Justin Fields killed without some veteran presences like Riley Reiff on it.
And just to specify on that, like I said, not likely to be earned incentive. If a player didn't hit the incentive last season, then it's categorized as not likely to be earned, and it does not count against the salary cap. So that's why the Bears, kind of constructed this deal the way that they did. They made it, like I said, easy to attain because the Bears only need to improve in 1 out of 6 categories, but it still does not count against the cap since that did not happen last year. Hopefully I explained that well enough, but are you surprised to see the Bears making these moves to improve their offensive line so late before training camp?
No, I mean, I think it was super necessary, as Brad mentioned, that offensive line needed some serious help. Adding Riley Reiff, adding Michael Schofield as well, who has started games in this league the day before on a veteran salary benefit deal as well. So adding just guys to this offensive line to help out Justin Fields is obviously a pivotal thing. For Riley Reiff, it's already his third NFC North team, spent the first five years of his career in Detroit, the next four with Minnesota, now joins the Bears after spending last year in Cincinnati. His season was cut short last year with an ankle injury, only played in 12 games, was not part of the playoff run. But prior to this signing, Chicago's offensive line ranking and Mike Renner's offensive line ranking was 31st in the league. Seattle was 32nd. Adding these two guys should at least help them out. I don't know if that'll raise their ranking, but at the very least will help out Justin Field with what he had before compared to what he had now. So definitely some much needed help there up front.
Another piece of news out of training camp: Jimmy Garoppolo passed his physical, is not starting training camp on the PUP list, but he's not practicing with San Francisco while the 49ers continue to seek a trade for their previous starting quarterback, but now they have moved on to Trey Lance as their starter. I'm not really sure exactly where this goes, because it feels like, with him passing the physical, with him being off the PUP list, with him not practicing, feels like they want to get something done sooner than later on this. But as we've mentioned multiple times before, there are no obvious trade candidates out there for Jimmy Garoppolo. So, Brad, how do you see this all unfolding?
I think there's a legitimate consideration of, would we take a 5th-round pick, hypothetically, to send him to X team over cutting him and letting the Seattle Seahawks, probably the only team remaining in that NFC West, that would swoop in and sign him on a probably 1-year deal or whatever the case may be. And they might say, look, we'll sacrifice a day 3 pick and we'll keep him as late as possible, so that even if Seattle does sign him, let's say it's mid to late August, he doesn't have enough time to get up to speed, to generate chemistry with those guys in Seattle, because they really are the only team remaining. But bigger news: passing is physical. There is no longer an injury guarantee. He's basically bubble boy now in San Francisco, and they're not going to let anything happen to him. They can move on with 0 penalty at this point in terms of his 2022 compensation. It's just a matter of if they can strike a deal or if they want to just complicate things for the Seattle Seahawks.
All right, we've been thinking about starting options for Jimmy Garoppolo for a number of months now, but we're almost getting to the territory where we have to think about backup options for Jimmy Garoppolo, and where maybe it wouldn't create an awkward situation for him to be a backup. And, we've mentioned teams before, like the Houston Texans. I almost feel like it would create an awkward situation if he was going to be Davis Mills' backup, because he's so much more experienced and, he's been a better player than Davis Mills over the last few years. So are there any obvious teams that we're missing that could be potential trade options for Jimmy Garoppolo, or even if he does get cut, a team beyond the Seattle Seahawks?
Yeah, I mean, we've mentioned them before. It's really just Cleveland if there's a season-long suspension. I know Kevin Stefanski, came out today and said Jacoby Brissett would be the QB1 if Deshaun Watson gets a suspension. But, still, if it's a full year thing, which I don't think we're expecting that by now, but let's just say it is, would they want to go with Jacoby Brissett for a full year? The one thing I'll mention with Brad's example is that if this keeps on lingering, and we have to make it clear, like, he's been cleared to throw, but he's not fully cleared to do everything yet. So this might linger for a few more weeks until he's fully cleared to do all the throwing. And if that's the case, I think his agent is also involved in all of this, and they would have to renegotiate a contract with an acquiring team. In that scenario, it might be better off for him just to get released and say, we're not doing anything. Release us. Let us find the home when he's a free agent, and there is no trade draft picks going back the other way. So the longer this takes, I think it just gets more closer to the territory where he's getting released. He'll get to pick his own home on his own, and then we'll see what happens from there. Maybe it is Seattle. I think that is at least one thing that San Francisco is keeping an eye on and they're worried about, because as you said, Doug, I think that's the one team that makes the most sense right now for him to have a logical chance at starting early on in the season.
Let's talk about some players who also are not practicing right now. Hold-ins across the league. Players are no longer holding out because they would get fined millions of dollars, but they can show up to camp and then not practice. So, Ariel, I'll start off with you. Who's a player who's currently holding in that you're monitoring right now?
Yeah, there are a few around the NFL. The one that is interesting to me, I mean, I think all of them are, but Derwin James in LA, Brandon Staley, their head coach, was pretty open about this one today, saying Derwin is not practicing as he wants, as he waits for a new contract. So that's officially a hold in there. The thing here is that both sides have had discussion over the last several weeks and even months, and the belief is it's progressing in the right direction to get done. And the expectation has always been that James will become the highest paid safety in the NFL. That is currently held by Minkah Fitzpatrick at around $18.2 million per season. Obviously, the concern of James has never really been his play. It's rather been his availability. He missed all of 2020. He only played 5 games, I believe, in 2019, but he returned last year, played at an all-pro level, finished with 78.1 PFF grade, had over 115 tackles, 2 interceptions, 3 forced fumbles. Of course, the Chargers just missed the playoffs last year, but made a lot of reinforcements this year on the defense. Having a happy safety in the back obviously will only help that. So definitely one that's moving in the right direction. And Brandon Staley said today that as soon as the deal gets done, he will be back on the field practicing fully after also undergoing shoulder surgery this offseason.
The one that I'm watching right now is the 49ers wide receiver, Deebo Samuel. 49ers have been very transparent, I'd say, over the last couple of days about their dealings with Deebo Samuel. About, John Lynch was saying that they're optimistic or hopeful that they'll have some news soon in an extension. And now the fact that Deebo Samuel is not practicing, only working off to the side, I think that could potentially accelerate talks here. But it's also kind of amazing that we're even talking about the 49ers and Deebo Samuel being this close on a deal, or at least it seems like so close on this deal, because this wasn't just reporting that Deebo Samuel, wanted to trade out of San Francisco. He told Jeff Darlington that he wanted to be traded by the San Francisco 49ers. And now we're to the point where I think that everyone is expecting a deal to get done, certainly sooner than later for Deebo Samuel. So, lots of off-season drama that seems to have fixed itself along the way here. I certainly was not surprised that Deebo Samuel reported to camp. He was there during the spring, and it seems like something could get done there very soon. Brad, who's a hold-in that you're monitoring right now?
Yeah, I think a fascinating situation for a handful of reasons is Bears linebacker Roquan Smith. New head coach Matt Eberflus comes over for the Indianapolis Colts, and presumably the guy that Roquan Smith wants to surpass is formerly Darius Leonard, now Shaquille Leonard. Wants to get in that $100 million over 5 years range. Roquan Smith does not have an agent. He is self-represented with a financial advisor, which is another interesting wrinkle to this entire process. And Matt Eberflus said in a radio hit this morning, actually, that Roquan Smith will now play the weak side or will linebacker position. I personally think it's a better fit for his skill set, but he has been a Mike or middle linebacker so far in his career. So, maybe they want to see how he plays at the new spot. But look at some of his numbers since he joined the league in 2018. 11th best coverage grade among all linebackers. Second most tackles with 391. Second most tackles for loss and no gain with 57. And fourth in sacks with 15. So a really good player, no matter where you put him, no matter what you're asking him to do. And I think a great fit in this new will spot. But it seems like the Bears are really not comfortable going to that top of the market range. His report to Ian Rappaport, NFL Media, was none of the offers have been even close to what I'm looking for and just not what I'm comfortable dealing with. So that one could progress for a while. There's also optimism there, but it's probably going to be one of the biggest, if not the biggest deals at the position in the NFL. So it could go on for a bit longer.
Absolutely. The Kansas City Chiefs rewarded tight end Travis Kelce with a pay bump. I'm not sure if I would even really call it a raise in the 2022 season. They moved, reportedly, this was according to Ian Rappaport of NFL Media, $3 million from the back of Travis Kelce's contract, moved it up to 2022. So he gets that now, I think, in salary and 53-man roster bonus, but still only getting paid $10.5 million in 2022. And it's amazing how far these tight end contracts have lagged behind other positions, most notably wide receivers who are getting paid, $25-30 million a year. And we're talking about Travis Kelce making $10.5 million as arguably the best tight end in the NFL this season. So this was nice of the Chiefs to do, but Brad, it certainly doesn't seem like it's going to be affecting the tight end market overall right now. Am I wrong in saying that?
No, you're totally right. He signed an extremely team-friendly deal, and people say, well, he reset the market. Yes, but he has $30 million in salary tied to his age 35 and age 36 season. So, very much so backloaded. If you look at just through the first new year of the deal, he was scheduled to make about $11.75 million. Mark Andrews at $26 million through his first new year of his deal. So getting that additional $3 million, like you said, not really a raise, kind of like Stephon Gilmore back in the day with New England Patriots. They moved money from later years back into this year, but obviously well-deserved. Has the most receiving yards since he signed that extension in 2020 with 2,541 and the most touchdowns with 20. So clearly still the best tight end in the NFL, deserves a pay bump however it comes about.
Yeah, the tight end market overall, Ari, is kind of a fascinating one to follow. I think that you've talked about it before where Rob Gronkowski reset the market years ago, and then he played out through the length of that contract. And now we've even seen it a couple of times since then where George Kittle and Travis Kelce signed their contracts before other salaries at other positions skyrocket. We even saw it last year with Mark Andrews where he signed his contract extension before his true breakout season. So maybe if that extension happened this year, maybe he really resets the tight end market. Maybe if, other positions had gotten higher salaries before Kittle and Kelce signed their contract extensions, maybe they would be making $20-30 million. It's just, it really has not worked out great for tight ends at this point, but there are some other players at that position who could be getting contract soon. TJ Hawkinson is one of them. He's got a deal coming up. But to me, when I look down the line, it might take until Kyle Pitts signing his contract extension for tight end contracts to actually catch up to positions across the NFL.
Yeah, I mean, the guys who are coming up, there's Darren Waller, you mentioned Hawkinson, Dalton Schultz maybe next year, Mike Gesicki next year. But I just don't know if these teams, whenever they're up to the negotiating table, like it was with Gronkowski when he signed that contract, he was under contract for 8 years. He became the best tight end in all of football. All the other tight ends who were up for contract, these teams went up to them and say, hey, you're not Rob Gronkowski. You're not going over him. And that's why it's been stuck for so long. I don't know if any of these guys are going to be surpassing a George Kittle or a Travis Kelce. I mean, I think they should be trying to, but will these teams actually step up to the plate and move it up? I mean, if you look at some of the receivers who are getting paid more than the highest paid tight end right now, you have guys like Courtland Sutton, Hunter Renfrow, Allen Robinson, Robert Woods, Kenny Galladay, Christian Kirk, Brandon Cooks. I mean, these are guys getting paid more than George Kittle and Travis Kelce. It just shows how far behind the tight end market is right now. I really don't know who is that next guy who could push it forward and really reset the market. You mentioned Kyle Pitts. We still have a while until we get to that point. So it's a rough time right now for tight end. It's been a rough time for a while. And I think, at least for me, maybe Brad could let us know more. I think they'll be stuck for a few more years at the very least with where they are right now.
Yeah, because I think that even if, Hawkinson or Waller, I think that we'll probably expect them to exceed the deals that Kelce and Kittle signed, but they're not going to double those deals. They're not going to, they're not going to be making $5 million more per season. It's going to be kind of, minimally more than the top tight end. And you see that at other positions like Kyler Murray's not the second best quarterback in the NFL, but he's making the second most money. It's not necessarily going to be the best tight end in the NFL making the most money, but they're not going to be signing considerably more than these top tight ends. Am I wrong in saying that, Brad?
So that's a great point. So we talk about George Kittle. Not only did he get the $15 million per year, which was the most, but another way we look at resetting the market is you adjust for salary cap inflation. So what is your average per year as a percent of that year's salary cap? And so George Kittle got about 10% of the salary cap in the year he signed. I could be off on that, but nevertheless, what he got was actually competitive if you look backwards. So like you said, if you sign a guy, that tops the total value, but as a percentage is way behind some of the prior deals, right now, Kittle's deal projected forward would be more than $15 million. So if they got just 15.25, you're not actually resetting the tight end market. You're just slightly surpassing it. So 100% with you. I will say I do think Darren Waller could get there, but I agree again on a slight surpassing, not an actual market reset.
Yeah. And it's another situation where Darren Waller didn't have the best season last year. Maybe if he was coming off, his best NFL season, maybe he does reset the market, but the timing just over and over and over again has not worked out for those tight ends. I think that you will need to see a new best tight end in the NFL They're like clearly better than the rest of the competition, sign a new deal for that market to really truly reset. But certainly an interesting conversation there that we've had a few times on this show, but I always enjoy revisiting it just because it's so strange that tight ends make less than guards and all these other positions across the NFL, given how valuable they are. And those are guys who score points. Those are guys who rack up a ton of yards and, work in the run game as blockers. And it's a super valuable position, and the money just is not adding up right now. But keep it on PFF.com for all of your news and analysis. You can still use PFF 40 for 40% off an annual subscription at PFF.com. You can follow Ari on Twitter at MySportsUpdate. You can follow Brad on Twitter at PFF_Brad. Follow me on Twitter at Doug Kyed, and we will be back with you guys again next week. So enjoy all the training camp tweets until then.